What is happening, guys? Ollie here. I've been debating making this video for a while, but a couple of people have asked me, so I thought, why the hell not? A few people out there have said that they do quite like my thumbnails, so I've decided to make a video to show you how I make my thumbnails. I'm not an expert in any sort of photo editing or Photoshop. I don't even use Photoshop, so I'll just show you some of the things that I've learned over my time on YouTube so far, some of the techniques that I use, and just some of the things that I try to implement into my thumbnails to try and draw people in, or make them pop at least. So I use software called Gimp. It is completely free software, and it is very similar to Photoshop in a lot of ways, but I do think it's some absolutely brilliant software. So I'm just going to create a new image here, and I always do it by 1280 by 720 pixels because that tends to be the image format that YouTube likes to accept. And right now I'm actually going to be doing my thumbnail for my next Resident Evil episode, or Resident Evil 0 episode, part 5. So I have some images that I've got set up here that I'm going to chuck in. During this episode of Resident Evil 0, I did take on the famed giant bat in the church, so I kind of wanted to implement that into the thumbnail because I suppose it's a bit of a big moment in it, a sort of boss part. So I'm just going to paste that in as a new layer on here, and I got this off Google Images. I'm wondering how I can implement that into the background. What I'm going to do, I'm going to transform and scale it up a bit, and try and bring it over to the side just here, but I don't want to leave any white. Scale it up a little bit. Oh, that's a bit too much. I've got that. Failing that, I do have another image that I'm going to pop in. Let's paste that one as a new layer. I've got this one here, though it feels like it's a bit grainy, so I'm unsure about that. So if I rotate it here, wondering how that will end up looking. Possibly. I'll leave that there now anyway. I'm liking the look of this one more so far, just because the image seems a little bit brighter. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to create another new one over here, and I've got a screenshot that I made of myself just after filming. Okay, so I've got this image that I've just pasted in here. I'm going to scale it down so I can try and get the entirety of me in the frame. And I know in actual Photoshop, obviously it's a paid for service, but you can do a sort of automatic cutout. I don't believe Gimp has anything like that. I mean, I've never found anything like that in the Gimp software, so I can use the trim tool up here and cut myself out. Now obviously Gimp is free software, so if you want to use Gimp instead of Photoshop, yeah, you may have to do some things manually. It will take you an extra couple of minutes, but I feel like it's definitely worth it. So I'm just going to trim around the outline of myself. No, I mean, I say roughly, it's not roughly. I try to do it relatively accurately, but it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but try and get it as near close as I can. Something I haven't mentioned yet, actually, when you're obviously going around curved bits, you can, if you want to, I don't know how to do it because I don't use it, but you can go into the settings for this and actually curve the lines, but I don't feel like you really need to if you just put them close enough together, because obviously I've zoomed in, and if you put them close enough together, then by the time you zoom out, then it's going to look fine anyway. Okay, and now I have a full outline around myself. I don't bother doing the chair or anything like that. So once I've got that, all I've got to do is go into the select tab up here and invert that selection. So now it's just selecting everything around me. Press delete and boom. So now I go to select none, and there you go. I've just got myself with a white background. There might be some slightly rough areas, as you can see, like right in there, but you don't need to worry about that right now. So now I'm just going to right click the layer and alpha to selection. That will just select that again. And then I'm just going to edit, copy, go back into my original picture, edit, paste as, new layer, and there you go. Now I'm just going to scale that up a bit because I do like to try and get a decent amount of me in frame, because it is always good to have a human face or yourself or something in your thumbnail, or most people say, because it does help the viewer to relate with you, I guess, a little bit. Studies have also shown that human faces in thumbnails are actually tempt people to click on them a bit more, maybe because of relatability. I'm unsure. Do your own research on that. And I'm always unsure what sort of pose to do, like what I actually do to get these photos, because I don't just take a photo or like a screenshot while I'm posing. What I do, I use the OBS software that I actually do all my recording with. And then once I've finished recording, I'll just do a quick recording of me doing some poses. I'll hold the pose for a couple of seconds, then try another pose. Once I've got like a little bit of footage, I'll go through that footage, find a pose I like, take a screenshot of that. I'm just going to rotate that a bit because I don't like things being straight, in all honesty. I kind of like a bit of crookiness or a bit of kind of thing. I feel like I still need to be a little bit bigger as well. Now there are some edges that you might look at and think they're not perfect, or it's just not going to look right. I'm going to show you how to make that look a bit better now, but you do have to remember that the majority of people that are going to be watching things on YouTube are going to be watching things on their phone, so they're going to see that thumbnail very small on that smaller screen, obviously. So a lot of those minute details that you might be looking at right now and think, that's not perfect, they're not even going to pick up on. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a bit of a shadow effect onto the image of me, because I feel like that just cleans everything up a little bit, makes everything look not realistic, but it just makes things feel like they fit a bit more in the image. What some people do is they literally go around the outside of the image with a featherer, just to feather things in a little bit, but I really don't feel like it's necessary, because as I said in my earlier point, most people are going to be seeing these thumbnails on a small screen on a phone. So minute details like that, they're not going to pick up on. But I like to do this just because, well, while I'm looking at it now, makes me feel a bit better about it. So the layer I've got of just me, I'm going to alpha to selection that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the select tool here. I'm going to grow, and I'm going to grow it by a number of pixels. I'm thinking maybe about 4 pixels for this one. And as you can see, that line has just grown out a little bit, so it's extended, and as you can see, there's a little bit of space in there now. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to right click on the layer, I'm going to add a new layer. I want it to be filled with transparency, make sure it's filled with transparency. Then I'm going to bring that layer underneath, and while everything is still selected, make sure it's still selected, I'm going to edit and I'm going to fill that with black. Then I can select none, and then I'm going to go into the filters, blur, Gaussian blur. A lot of people use Gaussian blur in their thumbnails, but as you can see, that black, I've got it previewed on here. It just not feathers it. It blurs it that tiny little bit. So as you can see, if I bring that down to no blur, it's just a black line around me. If I bring that blur up a little bit, it just blurs it that tiny bit, almost making it look a sort of shadow. Then I'm just going to merge these 2 layers of the shadow and me together. So right click, merge down, boom, that is now all one layer. Bring that up a bit just to make sure it's in frame. Okay, now something else I'm going to show you that I do sometimes, I don't always do this, but I feel like it might be not necessary here, but I think it'll help. While I've got that background layer selected, obviously I want the focus to be on that bat's dead face. Then while I've got that selected, I'm going to go into filters, blur, I'm going to go into focus blur. And as you can see, that focus area is going to stay in clarity, and the rest of it is going to blur outwards. So now I'm just going to edit that and make that circle a bit bigger, a lot bigger in fact. The blur radius, if I bring it down, as you can see, the blur isn't as much. I don't want it too blurred, just a little bit like that. And I'm going to OK that. And I just feel like that focuses things a bit more on what I want to be the focus of the thumbnail. Now I do have a PNG image of the title of Resident Evil 0. You can get a lot of them on Google Images and then just go into the source and just download them. You obviously want to download them as a transparent PNG, because otherwise you're going to have that background on and it's not going to look right. I'm going to drag that in, and there it is. Now that is obviously under the layer of me. I don't know whether to keep it like that. I feel like I want it over the top. I have done some text before where I have layered the text underneath the layer of me, or underneath the layer of another image, just because I feel like I wanted the image to be the focus of it. An example of that I think would be my final The Last of Us Part 2 thumbnail that I did. Let me see if I can find that as an example. So yeah, I don't know if you can see that there, I'll zoom in on it, but you can see that I layered the title of The Last of Us Part 2 underneath that image I had of Ellie, and I cut out her hair there as well to layer it under that, because I wanted Ellie to be the focus of that image. But I'm not going to do that with this image, because I feel like I just want the title to be visible. So I'm going to rotate that. I'm not too bothered if some of it is cut out, though I might not rotate it so much. It's all about finding a balance. I might Oh, I can't move that image up too much more. Unless, oh, I don't want to... it's always about experimenting, trying to make it look right. I feel like if I maybe do it that way, like that. Okay, in which case, why don't I... Damn it. If I scale that title down a bit, I don't want it to be too small though, because as I say, remember, a lot of people are going to be viewing these on a phone screen. So I want things to still be visible, but I feel like that kind of works. Just like that. Bring that image down a little bit. Yeah, I feel like that kind of works. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the shadow effect on the text that I did myself earlier. So alpha to selection on that. Select it, grow. I'm only going to grow it by 2 pixels this time because it's much smaller. New layer. Boom, boom. Fill with background color. Filters, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm just going to blur it by about that much. I feel like that works. And then I'm just going to merge that down and boom. There you go. Now this might not be one of the best thumbnails I've ever made. Not done, by the way. But I feel like these Resident Evil 0 thumbnails are actually quite difficult to make. It's very difficult to find decent images that I can use for background and centerpieces. Especially on Google Images. Because most of them are gameplay screenshots. And I mean, the graphics in Resident Evil 0 aren't bad, but I don't think they make well for great HD images. Now, just after killing the bat, there was a moment when Billy said, "Die, devil bird." So I feel like if I add a little bit more text in, I don't like putting too much text in the thumbnail, but just enough to convey what I'm on about. I don't want to fill the whole thumbnail with text. I feel like if I make the text white, bring the font down to about 70. Devil bird. Okay, now I'm gonna just highlight that and bring the font up a little bit. Not too much about that. I feel he's right. Then I'm gonna alpha selection that, and I'm gonna do exactly the same thing again. Except this isn't really for a shadow effect. It's just more to bring the text out a bit, to not make it pop, make it stand out. So I'm gonna grow that again. I'm gonna grow it by 3. I feel like. If I don't like it, I can always go back and redo things. So I brought that layer down. I'm gonna edit, fill that with background color. Select none, and then I'm gonna filter blur. Not much on that, just a little bit. Merge that down, and boom. I've got that text there. Now I'm gonna rotate that with the rotate tool. Also, not all of your tools appear in here. A lot of them might be in this drop down menu, but some of the most used ones will end up in this corner here. Now, what a lot of people do in their thumbnails to literally point out things that are the centerpiece of the thumbnail, or that they want people to notice, or look at this. They literally use arrows, and I do the same thing, as you've probably noticed. So I have an arrow PNG image that I use all the time because nice, big, red, bright red stands out. So I'm going to rotate that into place. Obviously I'm going to scale it down as well, so let's scale. I don't want it too big because of course I don't want it to take up the whole shot, but I will bring it out a little bit more. Feel like that works. Alpha to selection, I'm going to do the same thing again just to make it stand out a bit more. So let's grow it by 3. New layer. Okay. And fill it with background color. Select none. I'm not going to bother doing any blur on that because I think it looks fine. I also did forget to put in this bit. Another bit of text. Bring that down to 70. Part 5. Oh shit. I need to actually put it as a word. I keep forgetting that this text, this font doesn't have numbers. Bring that up a little bit, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing again. Okay, now I've got that. I'm just going to rotate it into place a little bit. And I'm going to pop it down here next to the title because I feel like that's where it belongs. Okay, now I've got the majority of the thumbnail in place. There's a couple of things I can do to maybe make it look a bit nicer. Now in Photoshop, you do have tools such as auto contrast or auto color correct, things like that. And they are brilliant tools, but I feel like they're not really needed. I mean, I suppose if you are cranking out content constantly, like every day, and you wanted to whip up a thumbnail like that, then yeah, I feel like it'd be definitely worth it and you should go and get Photoshop, because some of the tools in there are going to be absolutely brilliant for you. But for someone like me who does 2 to 3 videos a week, the extra little bit of time, the extra few minutes it takes to do these things manually, it doesn't really bother me. So again, that's why I think Gimp's free software is absolutely brilliant for this kind of thing. Forgot to mention there will be a link to download Gimp in the description. But anyway, one thing I do tend to do toward the end of the process is I go into colors. You can go through the hue, chroma and everything, but probably shouldn't touch that if you want your thumbnail to look realistic. Anyway, the best thing to do is to right click on the top layer and just click new from visible. I think my camera might be covering it, but there's an option there called new from visible. Do that and that's going to put you an entirely new layer at the top of everything. So that is just one layered picture now. Now what you can do is go into colors, brightness, contrast. You can muck about with this a little bit if you wanted to, though I tend not to. I mean, I've got something that I used a while ago there, but I'm going to reset it because I really don't think I need to bother with that. Let me get the preview on and just have a look here. I mean, I can contrast it a little bit, maybe make it a little bit brighter, but at the same time, I feel like that takes away from what this thumbnail is really trying to portray, something dark and creepy. So if I just reset that, I feel like that's fine as it is with regards to brightness and contrast, so I'm just going to leave that as it is. Levels, I tend not to touch because I don't really know anything about it, but one thing I do tend to do is I go into curves. Now this, if you've ever seen an Instagram filter, kind of like that, well in my opinion anyway. So you've got your color curves here, it kind of relates to brightness in a sense, but I tend to have it on smooth curve type. I tend to just up the curve a little bit and then around here bring it down, then up here bring it down a bit, bring it up like that, and just see how it looks afterwards. It kind of, well, curves the color a little bit in a sense, but I feel like afterwards it ends up kind of looking like it's been through an Instagram filter. So if I've got that, I can then just turn the visibility of that layer off and on, just to have a look, see what I prefer, whether it's without that or with that. You can muck about with that curve a little bit to get the sort of thing you want, but I feel like if you muck about with it too much, you're going to end up ruining it and then have to just delete that and do it again. So I just like to muck about with the curves just a tad, but I feel like I quite like that with those curves on. Something else that I do sometimes with regards to that little shadow I put around me, I do sometimes put a little white layer on there as well underneath the black layer. To make me stand out a little bit, but I feel like it didn't really need it this time. Again, just trying to portray that sort of dark, spooky vibe, and I feel like just having a white stand out me with a bit of a white background, if you know what I mean, it just kind of took away from that. So I feel like I kind of wanted to make myself look a bit more integrated into the frame. These aren't technical terms, by the way, I'm not an expert, but that tends to be the rule of thumb for my thumbnails and the process I tend to go through. It doesn't normally take me very long, and one of the goals I do try to strive for when making my thumbnails is filling as much of the frame as I can. I don't want to leave any dead space or blank space or anything like that. I want something to be in pretty much everything, so obviously I've pretty much filled this side of the frame with me and my reaction face and all of that, and then again I've pretty much filled this side of the frame with that dead bat's head. So again, I don't want to be making things too small, I don't want to be leaving any empty space that I could have used, and again remember, most people are going to be viewing these thumbnails on their phone in a very small format, so you want to be filling up the frame, because if you make things too small, they're barely even going to notice it. I see lots of thumbnails, and I've done it myself in all honesty, where they just put an image of themselves in the corner or popping out in the bottom corner, just doing a little reaction face. And yeah, you can do that if you feel like the rest of what's in the image fills up the frame and is important, and the rest of what is in the frame you want to be the focus, and you're not really leaving any dead space. But if I was doing something similar to this and I was leaving that on this side and then I made myself really small down here, as I've seen a lot of people do, then you're going to have all this empty space up here that you could just use. And again, people who see this on their phone aren't really going to notice that little image of you in the corner. And again, remember, you want to be including your face if you can, because people are going to relate to a human face in the thumbnail. Or so they say. When I'm done, I'm just going to save a copy of that first. I'm going to put it in the folder that I have. Resident Evil 05 thumbnail. Save that, and then I'm just going to export as, I always export it as a JPEG image. Same export. It always comes up automatically 90 quality. I always rack it up to 100 and export it like that. So now I've got all of my folders, my videos here. If I go into here, these are all the images I sort of downloaded to try and use, and there is that thumbnail that I've just made. Again, I'm not an expert at photo editing or anything like that. These are just some of the techniques I have learned over the past year while doing YouTube. If by contrast you look at some of my older thumbnails, they are pretty bad. For instance, if I go right to the last page and have a look at this monstrosity, I had no idea what I was doing, so I just thought I'd get that image of 2B and think, why not try and mold my face onto it? I did a terrible job of it, though I still use that slogan today. Anyway guys, those are some of the tips and tricks I use when making my thumbnails. As I say, I'm not an expert, I don't know that much. I've just picked some things up along the way, and I suppose I'm getting better as I go. Maybe in another year I'll do another video like this with some tips and tricks, because hopefully I'll pick up even more tips and tricks that I can implement into my own stuff. There goes the cat. Thanks very much for watching guys, my name is Ollie. I have no idea what I'm doing, somewhat, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.